Guillermo del Toro, or according to the film junk gang, more affectionately known as G Del T, is a 61-year-old Mexican author who began his feature film directorial career in the 1990s and crewed many well-known films and even co-authored the Strain trilogy with Chuck Hogan, which was made into the FX TV series. Growing up in an affluent family of Spanish descent, Del Toro grew up with media that cultured his interest in films and horror iconography. Even before expanding my interest in horror movies, I remembered 3 of Del Toro's films leaving an indelible mark on me. It began with Mimic with Josh Brolin and Mira Sorvino about an infestation of human-sized alien cockroaches festering within the underground system in New York City, which will always be nostalgic as one of those movies from the era, bringing character to the underground train system. A few years later, I caught The Devil's Backbone, or El Espinazo del Diablo, about an orphanage during the Spanish Civil War, where the proprietors were much scarier than the ghosts that haunted the premise. The massive bomb stuck in the middle of the courtyard will always be the visual to remember from the wonderfully crafted period drama. The pinnacle of Del Toro's filmmaking was his dark fantasy feature Pan's Labyrinth, or El Laberinto del Fauno, when a twisted version of a fairy tale like Alice in Wonderland, set during the Francoist Spain when the hardship of surviving in a despondent world made a young protagonist yearning for an escape. These movies triggered that intrigue in me with Del Toro's earlier movies, including Chronos, a strange vampire tale which once again dug deep into the atrocities and evil nature of the humankind, and the running motif of a dark fairy tale with a prominent child character already reared its head from this 1992 movie. Del Toro's brilliance in writing memorable stories with horror elements and had its dexterity to bring it to screen only helped to propel him to bigger projects and landing him to some big studio franchises. His dabbling into horror filmmaking gave him the opportunity to direct Blade 2 with Wesley Snipes, returning as the human-vampire hybrid vampire hunter. In the pre-MCU days, Blade 2 did not get its acclaim but gained a cult following. He also allowed Del Toro to do the live-action adaptation of Dark Horse Comics' Hellboy, as he brought the story of a spawn from hell that was exhumed by the Nazi during the World War II, who fortuitously joined the Bureau of Paranormal Research and Defense and fight for the good of the humankind. Collaborating with his chums in Ron Perlman and Doug Jones made Mike Mignola's creations to come alive on the big screen. A sequel, also written and directed by Del Toro, called The Golden Army, which cranked up the spiritual realms the BPRD would stumble into and proved to be a bigger financial success. A third film was being planned but was never realized, and a couple of reboots had been released but neither captured the magic Del Toro and his team had concocted. In 2013, Del Toro fulfilled his kaiju dream by creating Pacific Rim with a kaiju-infested Earth, seeing the governments of the world creating a giant mecha called Jaegers to stop this Godzilla wannabe who had crept out of the Pacific Ocean to inflict unspeakable destructions and genocide on the human race. A sequel to Pacific Rim was being made, and proved once again without Del Toro, a franchise would be sinking into oblivion, pun intended. 2 years after the release of Pacific Rim, which proved to be a financial success, Del Toro released his passion project, a gothic romance horror movie known as Crimson Peak, starring an all-star cast of Tom Hiddleston, Jessica Chastain, and Mia Wasikowska. Crimson Peak might be an oversight by many horror fans, but the horror elements were on point and certainly creeped me substantially. Go check it out if you have not. This was followed by Del Toro's magnum opus, which netted him the Best Pictures and Best Director Academy Awards, In the Shape of Water, which fulfilled his dream to create his own The Creature from Black Lagoon with an ode to cinema. Doug Jones leveled up from ape sapient to the amphibian man who struck that memorable romance in water with Sally Hawkins. After being jettisoned from the Hobbit project, but retaining his writing credits for the trilogy, which felt like a bullet dodged, Del Toro also kept himself busy with writing for films like Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, co-written with his Shape of Water partner Matthew Robbins, as well as providing a story for Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. He also struck a fruitful partnership with Netflix, which exclusively released his animated film Pinocchio, the movie after Nightmare Alley, neither of which harbored any horror elements, and at this point personally I was not making a Del Toro films an event not to be missed, similar to late-stage Tim Burton? I suppose a director Del Toro's career seems to pattern after. The Del Toro Netflix Association also managed to give us his Cabinet of Curiosities, which was a fantasy horror anthology series with a strong gothic feel that I enjoyed incessantly, which led us to his version of Frankenstein. This is of course yet another rendition of Mary Shelley's 1818 novel of the same name, or The Modern Prometheus. Guillermo del Toro had been cited to find the Kenneth Branagh 1994 adaptation with Robert De Niro as the creature a tall order to be outdone. Del Toro had been planning for the adaptation since 2008 after the filming of Hellboy 2 and had his favourite creature performer, Doug Jones, paired to play the creature. The Dark Universe fiasco from Universal Pictures provided a spanner in the works until Del Toro's successful collaboration with Netflix saw the project being picked up finally. Before we go into the review of Del Toro's Frankenstein, I wanted to emphasize my lack of enthusiasm with yet another rendition of Frankenstein and whole concept of reanimation from inorganic or previously organic objects. My childhood concept of the Frankenstein monster, which many, even myself, is prone to use the name of Frankenstein for the creature, came from Fred Decker's The Monster Squad, which of course took liberty with the classic Universal's monsters, and the design was of course based from the signature Boris Karloff portrayal in those pre-code movies from the 1930s. As kids, we always got the concept of a gentle giant in an impassioned search for a sliver of humanity and normalcy that can be bestowed onto him. I have never watched the 1931 movie from director James Whale, nor Kenneth Branagh's version in 1994, neither did I read the novel from Mary Shelley. Therefore, I was going to the movie with zero knowledge of the motivation of Dr. Victor Frankenstein and the relationship between the creator and his creature. Del Toro started with the prelude, with a Danish naval ship being marooned in the icy Arctic plain, where they rescued a discombobulated Victor Frankenstein who was suffering from hypothermia. He was being chased by a creature with large frame and wearing only rags as a coat. The creature possessed immense strength and ability to heal and survive almost any bodily harm, which the Navy did not reckon at that time. After they thought they had vanquished the creature, Victor would narrate the whole story of his childhood to what had led him to be mired in this situation to the captain of the naval force. This began Victor's side of the tale about growing up in a loveless, strict and draconian environment with a renowned physician stepfather who was grooming him to be someone who could carry on his name. After losing his beloved mother at a young age, Victor vowed to reverse death, and when we first saw Oscar Isaac portraying the adult Victor, it was a memorable scene demonstrating his innate ability to dabble with alchemy that led to some reanimation that did not conform to the law of nature. We will witness the arrogance and unapologetic nature of our protagonist, despite getting a lot of help from a close confidant, Harlander, played by Christoph Waltz, who tolerated his indulgence and funded his laboratory. He also possessed little sense of morality when he became smitten with his younger brother William's fiancée, Elizabeth, with Mia Goth in the eye-catching role. Frankenstein did succeeded with his reanimation experiment, but the tedious part came in taming and molding the creature with young Jacob Elordi in a towering stature to suit him, replicating how his deceased stepfather had tormented him in his childhood. The Victor story epitomized Del Toro's penchant to tell story about a child and an estranged or absent father relationship. From interviews with cast and crew, there was certainly apt comparison between Frankenstein and his previous movie Pinocchio about human father figure, bringing an inanimate childlike figure to life, and despite the stark contrast in treatment from the father, there was still a lack of guardians for most of the child's journey. This father-child dynamic was also apparent in his earlier movies like Kronos, Devil's Backbone, and Pan's Labyrinth, and even a major plotline with Hellboy involving the titular character with his foster father. As expected, the creature came back to life from the deep abyss of the icy cold water, and before he lay his hand on his father figure, he would tell his side of the story and his ultimate desire when he had gotten sick of living in solitude. Since he had been brought to life by Victor, there was not a day that he had not been treated like a cretin in an underground cell until he found the elusive affection from Elizabeth. By this point, we realized who was the real monster between the two, as Victor would wrongfully allege the creature for false misdemeanor and tried to destroy his creation, only to realize his work had superseded his expectations. The interlude with the creature fleeing from the masses for being a hideous monster from the aesthetic point of view, and found an unlikely place to stay in, and even striking a more unlikely friendship with a blind old man. Once again, happiness was transient, which further pushed the creature towards his breaking point. What ensued was a cat and mouse game, like it was a gothic period version of No Country for Old Men. This dichotomy in the screenplay, which Del Toro adopted from the source material, gave ample time to tell the story from both sides of Victor Frankenstein and the creature. The movie still followed the 3-act structures, just disguised as the two tales with the prelude, giving the runway for the characters to tell their sides of the story. Unlike Zach Cregger's Weapons, which used the various point of views in separate chapters to intertwine at certain junctures, the story flowed immaculately from Victor's tale to that of the creature. I like how Cregger's told his story. I also find Del Toro's choice was not obtuse as well. Catching the movie in high resolution on Netflix did not erode the excellence in production and did not dilute the watching pleasures. Don't forget to catch the 45 minutes long behind the scenes making documentary called The Anatomy Lesson. Besides having the cast waxing lyrical over Del Toro, which in this case was not off-putting, especially how well the movie had turned out, we could see the intricacy Del Toro strived in his movie by surrounding himself with some of the best people in the industry. A lot of kudos was given to the costume designer Kate Hawley, the New Zealand costume designer Del Toro met through the development of The Hobbit and had collaborated with him in Pacific Rim and Crimson Peak. Some of the design she had created was mind-blowing, and even a shade of blue covered with snow for the Danish Navy was enthralling. However, when I first saw Elizabeth with her aviary-inspired costume, it reminded me of Satan from Go Nagai's Devilman. Another long-term collaborator of Del Toro was composer Alexander Desplat, who helped Del Toro with the classic The Shape of Water. He was not well known to make music for horror movies, but he was quoted saying he just created a musical score to fit the setting and mood, and not specifically a horror extravaganza. The grandeur set of the marooned naval ship, as well as the intricacy of Frankenstein's laboratory, will not cease for me to marvel at. An audience would suspect it was done via basic soundstage and green screens. There was much more work put in based on the documentary. The CG created animals though left a lot to be desired. As the title of the novel was also known as the Modern Prometheus, eagle-eyed viewers extracted the similarity with a scene with the creature deserted on a barren land to a scene from Ridley Scott's prequel to the Alien franchise, simply titled Prometheus. A stellar ensemble was gathered for this project, and a lot of fanfare will be given to Oscar Isaac and Jacob Elordi, an Aussie actor who is yet another impressive cast member from the HBO series Euphoria, and I could not remember his performance in Saltburn, the 2023 black comedy from Emerald Fennell, which set out to perturb viewers. Isaac is seamless to play heinous characters you would grow to like. Therefore, his version of Victor Frankenstein is engaging and charismatic, and one you will love to hate. Elordi Creatures is 100% better than Cole Sprouse in Zelda Williams' Lisa Frankenstein. But at the end of the day, would you put his version as the best representation of the Frankenstein monster in the cinematic history? I would say he did his best to emote under the makeup, and I enjoyed the heartwarming interlude he had with the blind man, more than any sort of attraction he had with Elizabeth. As for the rest of the cast, there was nothing to nitpick. Neither could I find any illustrious moment to spellbind me. All I could say was that having Tywin Lannister, aka Charles Dance, smacking me on the face with a rod after so warmly telling me he should spare smacking my hands, as those were tools needed for the craft, can be awfully intimidating. An interesting note was that Dance played Victor's father in 2015's Paul McGuigan directed Victor Frankenstein as well. Bookending the year of 2025 with Robert Eggers' Nosferatu and this movie, as well as sprinkling the likes of The Ugly Stepsister from Norway, as well as Luc Besson's Dracula: A Love Tale, I would not say we have a renaissance for notable period gothic horror, but I had a good time with all these movies, yet none can measure up to a classic like Bram Stoker's Dracula. Now come to the rating, and comparing with Eggers' Nosferatu, which I thought was a more captivating feature, yet I still had my Del Toro fanboy hat on, as well as you can see the production values on screen. I will likely to watch these movies back to back one of these days, but at the meantime, it is a 7.5 out of 10 for Frankenstein, the same score I've given to Nosferatu. If you like this exhaustive review from me, especially devoting a whole prologue about my affection for Guillermo del Toro's works in horror films and TV series, please click a like. A subscription to this channel will go a long way to reanimate this creature that could do so much better than what the creator had expected. The second part of the double feature with Justin Tippin's Him and Francis Lawrence, The Long Walk, closed the previous week. Hope you have caught that review. I think we should let the Frankenstein monster to rest, even in animated movies like Hotel Transylvania or in the Netflix Wednesday series. But I just realized there's a Maggie Gyllenhaal movie called The Bride, which drew inspiration from The Bride of Frankenstein.